Hi, hi, hi. Welcome back to Americans Learn. My name is Kit, and we're still continuing on with our learning lesson of the Pacific War. Joining me here is none other than my good friend and colleague, Daniel. Give it up for Daniel. He's in the house. How you
Hi
doing?
guys.
So it's good to have all of you here with us. So we're continuing on with the early stages of the war, and I think we're going to get one last behind the scenes learning lesson before we get to the eventual battles and conflicts that take place with Japan invading China, and which would eventually lead to the United States also getting involved with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Um, so this time around, we're going to be focusing on how the war in Europe influenced conflict in Asia. So, as we have said in the show before, again, all these previous wars and conflicts, they all build up to the next war that will happen. It's again gradual build up, historical events taking place, and everywhere the impact of humanity and what it does. It's felt all across the globe. So, Daniel, before we get started, is there anything you would like to share with our wonderful, wonderful viewing audience who is joining us? Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. By the way, folks.
Yeah, I would say a shout out to Kings in general. This is a
Yeah,
really I just have to say it like enough times. I feel like I would say it every episode if it wouldn't get repetitive that they've made an amazing series that
agreed.
is so detailed as to what happened that I like to think that like both of us have a bit of knowledge on this topic and
Hmm.
I'm learning stuff every second watching this and I think
Yeah.
that's amazing. I hope you guys are enjoying watching along with us.
Yeah, and Kate, listen, give us your thoughts, your comments in the comment section below. We'd like to get some feedback from all of you, our wonderful viewing audience. And if there's anything like you would like to add in, please feel free to share. This is an open community space, so let's all talk and continue on with the conversation. But without further ado, since I'm in charge of the ones and twos, let's get our learn on with how the war in Europe influenced conflict in Asia. And by the way, please support the original content creators, Kings and Generals, because it's the right thing to do. So there you go.
For 4 long years, Europe had been devastated during the First World War, leaving almost 30 million casualties, along with many more dying of famines and disease. As such, the world had suffered enough, so another major conflict like that one was strictly avoided by the main Western powers. But in the 30s, all of this would change with the rise of fascism and Nazism in Italy and Germany. While the war between Japan and China intensifies and reaches a stalemate in
Oh, can you pause it?
1939, a new
Go ahead.
Just a reminder that all the people that felt screwed on at the end of World War One,
Hmm.
that's your Axis powers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what a lot of people don't even remember is that, like, Germany, at least the German Empire, which would eventually become the German Republic during the aftermath of the First World War in the 1920s, was given this huge bill in which they had to pay for a conflict that they did not initially start. It was the Austrian-Hungarian Empire that
Yeah.
started it, So there you go. I actually found out something interesting too.
Mm.
One of my or not one of my great grandmother, when I was looking through, like, old family photos and documents, apparently she was born in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire.
Wow.
Yeah, I never knew that. I was like, whoa. It was like it's a piece of antiquity. I was like, huh.
Interesting.
I never knew that. That was something so in other words, I have an ancestor that was from a dead empire.
I feel like most empires are dead empires now. We just call them
Yes.
different things now.
Yeah, exactly. All right. All right. So let's go ahead and move on and find out. Well, hey Dan, what 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 could possibly go wrong with the aftermath of the First World War and an economic depression? What could possibly go wrong?
Oh, that reminds me of this thing where it's like someone goes back in time and is talking about, oh, do you fight in the First World War? And they're like,
First
First World
World
War.
War. It's like, and then you get that flashback, like, oh no.
new conflict is brewing in Europe, a conflict that is destined to change the course of history. Join us as we take a look at the start of the Second World War and the effects it had on the Japanese Empire and the United States. By the way, don't forget to check out our podcast on the Pacific War. It has all the episodes in a long-form format with extra details. The link is in the description. Snacking is always better than...
You jump ahead of this, but it's very funny to me that they're like, this is actually the abridged version we're doing now. Just what we could animate. We got more details. So check that out if you want to see more.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. If you want.
We can't react to that. We're not going to be able to touch it, but we're reacting to this because it's amazing.
Exactly. So we will fast forward to the commercial because I think the promo code might have passed already.
Yeah, it's about a year old.
So, but hey, if you want to do some good, viewers, support the original content creator. So there you go. Do that.
At the end of the Great War, the balance of power was drastically changed with the downfall of the German Empire and the rise of the United States as a world power. Because of the humiliating Treaty of Versailles, the newborn Weimar Republic was in a very difficult situation at the start of the Roaring Twenties, having to pay immense war reparations to their former enemies, and suffering a heavy military restriction upon its armed forces. Both of these problems would then lead to hyperinflation and economic crisis, as well as a lack of unity and political extremism plaguing the nation. The Germans also...
What could possibly go wrong?
Do you ever see those images in Germany of people just like wheeling wheelbarrows?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I have seen imagery of that, and I remember when my great grandmother was still alive. I think they still had old newspaper. So obviously, if you had a relative, if you remember them, because I'm obviously an older millennial, so obviously I have relatives who were in their 90s, very who've seen a lot in their time, and of course you have relatives that keep newspapers. And one of the newspapers, I remember seeing this as a kid, that I saw it only once, where it showed like people here in America just waiting in line just to get some soup and bread. It's just that's the craziest thing to see, and that was happening during that time. And the only other newspaper that I remember us having or them showing me was the clip of "War is Over" when the war is declared over by 1945. Yes, that's
Japan wishes they could declare that the war was over before that.
Lost a big portion of their homeland and all of its overseas territories, giving rise to a national sense of irredentism and revanchism, which would be key to the rise of ultra-nationalism in the country. Concurrently, the Treaty of Versailles would also fail to concede to the Kingdom of Italy all of the territories that they had been promised for their participation in the war. This was seen as a great humiliation by the Italian nationalists, leaving the way open for the rise to power of Benito Mussolini and his...
The biggest idiot in international history and a political fool. This man, Mussolini, right? He wanted to recreate a new Roman Empire. And all of his attempts, it's almost like a clown show. It ended with spectacular failure from this jagoff. Honestly. Yeah. I mean, the biggest... when you look into what he did and how he was trying to do it, big idiot. Fool.
I'm going to go full war with no industrial base to work with.
Actually, technically he did, but he put all his chips into the Spanish Civil War, which led Italy to have a massive decline in industry and all their weaponry and so much more. So in other words, the dude invested into something that he saw no reward in. His country was devastated by it. He had absolute power, and yet he has this brilliant idea of, I'm going to become Caesar 2.0. Dummy.
It's
dummy of the highest order.
He's like, we hear a lot of people, they're like, oh, the former president's like the guy in Germany. He's really bad. It's like, no, we've been saying the same thing for long. It's not that guy. It's this guy. By the way, if you do want to check that out, they have absurdly similar backstories, except one started poor.
Yeah, Mussolini.
But they both made their name on mass media.
Yeah, a big clown, a fool through and through, and basically he's the one who almost destroyed. Yeah, not destroyed, but he led his country into further decline. I actually have this book called World War II Day by Day, and in it there's a chapter in it where the king of Italy, the then king of Italy, writes to El Duce, and he basically says, "You are the most hated man in all of Italy. I do not sympathize with you. Don't write to me again."
He did make
fascist
the
movement.
Vatican City.
What's up?
He did give independence to Vatican City to get Pope points.
He did? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Vatican City.
Wow.
That was a deal made.
Yeah, I know that he tried to colonize Libya and tried to invade Egypt. That failed.
Syria.
Syria, and even in Ethiopia, he did something stupid there too, and got his rear end kicked.
Anyway, where's Japan in all
From
this?
1922 to 1934, Mussolini would go on to impose a totalitarian rule and build a solid groundwork for his dictatorship
Solid.
and his future expansionist prospects. Meanwhile, in
This dude is trying to create Rome again. What an idiot!
He's like, let
Germany.
me get the building, let me rebuild what we have already built, and then we can't rebuild, but we're going to try and rebuild it again with not the things to rebuild it.
Now hold on, Daniel. Since I'm Italian, I can say this and do this. Let me try to build the next Roman Empire. And I could say that because I'm Italian.
You know, it's
Mamma
funny.
mia.
I just saw a video last night that was this girl had an Italian boyfriend, and she tried to challenge him to speak without moving.
Mm-hmm.
It was the funniest thing ever because he just couldn't.
the far-right National Socialist German Workers' Party rose to prominence under the leadership of Adolf Hitler with ultranationalism, radical anti-Semitism, and anti-Bolshevism, as well as a complete rejection of the Treaty of Versailles as their core principles. Amid the political chaos of the Weimar Republic and the deterioration of the economy due to the Great Depression, Hitler's oratory skills, promising a strong central government, a racial cleansing, and an economic recovery, would earn immense support for the Nazi Party in the Reichstag. In 1932, the Nazis thus won the national elections and subsequently started a campaign of political pressure and intimidation against the other parties that would allow Hitler to establish a dictatorship and to become Führer by 1934. Hitler would then start a massive rearmament program, directly repudiating the Treaty of Versailles and remilitarizing the Rhineland by 1936.
I don't want to alarm anyone, because it just so you know, there were a lot of businessmen and tycoons that gladly invested into the Third Reich. You might know them, for example. A guy named Henry Ford. He didn't start anything. And this other dude, again, he tried to create some sort of media empire. This dude named Walt Disney. Does that name sound familiar to you, Daniel?
Never heard of it. Probably not anyone important in our life.
Yeah.
And also, Coca-Cola was a big... Coca-Cola got reparations after World War II for the U.S. bombing their facilities in Germany.
Like I said, Dan, I got to do that skit for the Fanta. There's that business meeting, and they're all sitting there, and one of the people at the board says, "Hey, let's do how Fanta got started," and the CEO just politely smiles at him, does this, and say, "I will effing kill you if you ever bring up that idea again."
Yeah, just for those of you who don't know, for those of you who don't know, Fanta exists because of the blockade, because of basically Coca-Cola couldn't get the Coca syrup sent to Germany because World War II. So they're like, well, I guess we'll make our own drink. That's Fanta.
But hey, everyone, leave Fanta. They're good company. They're good company. All right. Don't cancel them now.
I like Fanta. The taste marches across my taste buds.
Oh no! Hey, let's do an origin story of Fanta. I will effing kill you if you.
We should do it in conjunction with BMW with Volkswagen.
Oh yeah. See that window? I'm gonna throw you out of it if you.
Mercedes should join us as well.
Yeah, but no, seriously, folks, a lot of businessmen from America invested and were very wanted to build close relations with the Fuhrer of the Third Reich.
And we're really upset when the war happened.
Yes, very upset that they tried to even do a coup themselves. Hashtag Smedley Butler is an American hero. I wish people would talk more about him. He's a true hero.
It's at this point that the mutual hatred for Bolshevism prompted the Japanese Empire and Nazi Germany to sign the Anti-Comintern Pact, directed against the Communist International and the Soviet Union in particular.
When I look at the Soviet Union on that map, it's like, of all the people you want to instigate a fight with, I'm not going to pick on the biggest guy on the block, okay? I'm just not going to do it.
Well, he's the biggest, but he's also the emptiest.
Exactly, but the thing is, only Genghis Khan and his fantastic friends can conquer Russia. Everybody else, no.
It's funny because if you look at the map, like if they had this split through population, like 90% are in like the far left, like fifth of the country, and like no one lives anywhere else.
Yeah, because you know what, you can't, because there's a thing called Old Man Winter. Old Man Winter's the biggest resident in all of Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, Old Man Winter is the premier.
That's funny.
Japan hoped that this would become a military alliance against the Soviets, but after Hitler surprised them by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Stalin, this was not an option anymore. Relations between Germany and Italy also improved during this period, resulting in the creation of the Berlin-Rome Axis. As the United Kingdom and France couldn't contain the rise of Nazi Germany, and as they didn't want a Second World War that would be even more devastating for their empires, an approach of appeasement was taken towards German and Italian aggression. In this way, Austria, Memel and the Sudetenland were annexed, and Ethiopia, Albania and Czechoslovakia were invaded by the Axis powers without any retaliation.
Pause it.
Wary of the growing
Italy, congratulations. You took over countries with absolutely no infrastructure.
God, man, I gotta say again, this dude, Mussolini, you're trying to recreate something that's already dead. All right, ask the Romans how building an empire turned out for them. It didn't turn out so cash money.
You know, it'd be really funny if in Italy some business person made a hair product and called it Mussolini.
You wait, hold on. You know something? Because we'll probably talk. Maybe someday when we learn about the war in the European theater, we'll learn about good old Coco Chanel. Yeah, look her up, folks. Not a nice lady. Not a nice lady. Coco Chanel. All right. Thank you, Bill Burr, for that history lesson. Because even I didn't know that.
conflict that was brewing in Europe, the Congress of the United States passed a series of neutrality acts in the 30s that promoted isolationism and non-interventionism, trying to assure that the US wouldn't be entangled in European affairs yet again. And as the Axis powers were becoming ever more aggressive, the UK and France had no other choice but to prepare for war, guaranteeing the independence of Poland, Romania, and Greece in 1939. In response, Germany and Italy formalized.
I love that they're like, yeah, Austria-Hungary, I don't care.
Even no, it was Austria that got occupied because I think again, correct me if I'm wrong, but 80% of the population speaks German in Austria, or
Well,
like.
let me clarify what I mean.
Yeah.
Old borders mostly of Austria-Hungary. We don't
Yeah.
care, just Romania.
Yeah.
And that's mainly because of the USSR.
Yeah, and then there's also again the Third Reich I think also invaded Czechoslovakia too at the time.
Yeah, but I guess I'm saying they're like, appeasement.
Yeah.
Their own alliance with the Pact of Steel. Thus, war was now inevitable. Meanwhile, in China, after 2 years of bloody fighting, the Chinese were completely demoralized, and the Japanese continued to press their advantage. In February, Hainan Island fell to the Japanese, hoping to use it as a base for future naval invasions and bombing operations in southern China. Furthermore, the long Nanchang campaign concluded with the occupation of the city by early May, and the consolidation of their presence in the Jiangxi and Hunan regions. At the same time, conflicts with the UK would erupt because of the foreign aid that was flowing to China through Hong Kong and Indochina, consequently straining British-Japanese relations. But Japanese momentum would be interrupted by the escalation of border conflicts with the Soviet Union. As we've already covered, a big portion of the IJA command desired war with the Russians with the objective of destroying communism and securing the resources of Siberia. This expansionist doctrine, known as Hokushin-ron, drove Tokyo to sign the Anti-Comintern Pact in 1936, thus threatening the position of the Soviet Union in the east. But while the Soviets continued to reinforce their Manchurian border due to the threat that was posed by the Japanese Empire, the Kwantung Army saw some of their most elite forces redirected to fight in the ongoing war with China, leaving them in a weaker state along the border. Already in 1938, the Japanese had been defeated at the Battle of Lake Khasan, and the humiliation of this defeat prompted them to intensify a border conflict with the Mongolian People's Republic, a puppet state under the Soviets.
Pause this for a second again, just to make
Go
a
ahead.
point. God, you know, one thing I feel bad for is like the civilian government, or what's left of it, of Japan, is they're like, okay, we're going to do peace, and the military is like, well, these 5 officers took 500 people, and now we're at war with them.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, you know, it is important to note that, you know, we're witnessing firsthand what it's like when a government has absolute power, or at least the military takes control of the government, has absolute power, and there's no civilian oversight or any kind of checking it whatsoever. And it's just leading to further conflict. There is no peaceful resolution.
Well, it's even more than that, because like, you know, with like Germany, that is what happened. Italy tried to accomplish it and really couldn't. It was like semi-permeable. Like with Japan, it was like worse, because they had a civilian government that didn't want to do anything, and then the military couldn't even control its own soldiers, who had been told and trained that if you do these things in the name of the emperor, it's fine anyway and no one will punish you. So they're like, okay, we finally balanced our logistics. We have just enough men and material to... Ah, crap, they invaded Mongolia.
What could possibly go wrong?
In the resulting Nomonhan incident, the Kwantung Army was defeated yet again, and the plans for a northward expansion were finally
Zhukov.
revised due to the Soviets.
What's up?
Zhukov.
Oh, yeah. Ha! Come on, my lovelies.
This is where he started his ascent.
That's Zhukov. For anyone who has not seen the film Death of Stalin, Zhukov, the greatest character ever. I'm gonna have to report you to the Communist Party. You should see the look on your effing face.
Strength in the region. If you want a more in-depth coverage of this incident, don't forget to check out our video on the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. We know you'll absolutely love it. What is important from this battle is that the Hokushin-ron was finally dropped in favor of the Nanshin-ron, a doctrine backed by the IJN that sponsored a southward expansion into the rich and strategic regions of Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. Concurrently, the Japanese launched a new offensive directed against the cities of Suishan and Saoyang after their successful capture.
Again, I'm just looking at this, and they're going to overextend. What makes them think that they are going to stay around for forever? You're declaring war on everybody. You're that dude in the bar that's picking fights with everyone. You're not going to tell me that all the people in the bar are not going to just one day wait for you outside and curb stomp you. That's how it happens.
It's funny also because it's like they're like, hey, we're overstretched in China. What should we do? Let's attack like 4 more countries' holdings at once.
Not a brilliant idea.
Of Wuhan. Although Zhao Yang had been captured,
I would say, hold on. Wait, hold on. Let me rewind that again.
he's launched a new offensive directed against the cities of Suishan and Saoyang after their successful capture of Wuhan.
A city that will never be spoke of again in modern times. Wuhan.
Though Zhao
I'm
Yang
not gonna
had
say
been
anything.
captured
I'm not
by
sure
early
I'm allowed
May,
to.
the NRA managed to stop the Japanese advance towards Suishan at
Oh,
the
by the way,
Tonghai
pause
mountain
it.
ranges.
You know who's really happy that the National Army lost?
Let's see who.
The NRA.
Yep, true.
We'll have to think of another name.
The success in the defense of Suishan gave confidence to the NRA to counterattack Saoyang, expelling the Japanese divisions that held the town by the end of the month. Taking advantage of this successful defense and the Japanese difficulties at the Manchurian border, Chiang Kai-shek would continue to build up the military capabilities of the NRA army and would start to contemplate a possible major counteroffensive. Returning to Europe, the growing tensions between the Allies and the Axis would culminate on September 1st with the German invasion of Poland, triggering the start of the Second World War. On September 27th, Warsaw fell to the Germans, and the last elements of the Polish army surrendered by October 6th. The Germans would then occupy western and central Poland, preparing themselves for a general offensive against France, while the Soviets occupied eastern Poland, as per the agreement between Molotov and Ribbentrop. And back in China, the Japanese wanted to restore morale after their recent defeats and the general stalemate on the Chinese front, so they started a new offensive south of the Yangtze River, aimed at the major city of Changsha. The campaign was bloody, but General Shi Yu cunningly started to execute magnetic warfare, in which the advancing Japanese soldiers were attracted to ambushes, flanking attacks, and encirclements, thus inflicting heavy casualties on the IJA. The loss of life finally forced the Japanese to withdraw across the Liaodao River by late September, making Changsha the first major city to successfully repel Japanese advances, and Shi would press his advantage with a counterattack that decimated the retreating invaders. By October 10th, the success of Shi's counteroffensive meant that the Chinese had recovered.
Okay, imagine. What do you think the supply line for that looks like?
It's severely overstretched. I got curious. I'm kind of curious about the logistics in that too.
It's like, are they getting is there a harbor city that I'm sure there is on Chinese coast that they have to send ships to and then get those movements all the way through that narrow inlet that they have and then move that out? I mean, in Japan is like they're running out of oil too.
Yeah, and here's the thing here too, which a lot of people don't know. But if you look even at the German army at the time, even they got resupplied through horse-drawn carriages.
They just didn't shoot. Yeah, that's a huge thing. It's like Germany's always like, we got tanks and trucks and we're fully mechanized. In reality, yes, horses did most of their logistics.
Yeah, exactly. People don't talk about that.
The only country that really had true mechanized warfare was the U.S.
Yep, we're number one. We did it. Mechanized through and through.
Of Hunan, southern Hubei, and northern Jiangxi. Nonetheless, another Japanese offensive in November was highly successful at occupying South Guangxi and its capital Nanning, thus cutting off Chongqing from the ocean and effectively severing foreign aid to China's war effort via the sea. Now Indochina, the Burma Road, and the Hump were the only remaining effective trade routes. But at the same time, Chiang's winter offensive was finally ready to be launched. The NRA planned to conduct multiple attacks on all fronts to tie down the Japanese forces and prevent them from preparing new offensives. In late November, the winter offensive commenced, and the Japanese braced themselves to withstand the NRA onslaught, seeing major fighting until late March 1940. In the north, despite tying down and causing heavy damage to Japanese forces, the objective of seizing all major towns in southern Shanxi was not met, and thus the operation was seen as a failure. Yet the Japanese invasion of West Suiyuan and Ningxia was also defeated by warlord Ma Hongbin and his Hui Muslim troops, forcing the invaders back to the town of Baotou during the Battle of Wuyuan.
Probably a big major setback for the Empire of Japan. But again, look at this. Just overstretching of their supply lines and so much more. This is, again, a recipe for disaster that Japan will suffer as the war continues on.
Here's a question. So you see that? Okay, see that front line they have?
Yeah.
Top of China. That seems to be about as long of a front line as when Germany invaded Russia.
Has to be.
I mean,
has to be.
Or tie that down.
Or is that maybe even larger than what Germany?
Yeah, I would love to know the exact, like the linear line of that front line, especially with that bulge there. Because it's like when Germany did that their invasion, they had huge amounts of tanks, they had huge amounts of planes, they had 3 million troops. I don't know. They started with 1 million troops going into this. I'm not sure how many they have now, but they definitely don't have 3 million.
No.
Meanwhile, in central China, Japanese soldiers were successfully tied down south of the Yangtze River with relentless attacks, although the objective of recuperating Nanchang and Wuchang didn't come to fruition. While north of the Yangtze, Chinese forces would be completely defeated by the Japanese defenders, suffering heavy casualties. And in the south, the Japanese advance at South Guangxi and Yunnan was finally stopped, and a counterattack by General Bai Chongxi managed to recapture the cities of Longshan and Yingde, getting near Guangzhou. While the NRA failed to meet most of their prime objectives, overall, the winter offensive was very successful at cutting down Japanese strength in China, inflicting more than 20,000 casualties on the invaders. It also demonstrated to the British and Americans that the KMT were capable of tying down the Japanese, thwarting them from aiding Nazi Germany or fascist Italy.
Okay.
20,000 doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, I guess I would like to know at this point how many they have there, but 20,000 doesn't seem like a lot. And I noticed they didn't say how many China lost.
Exactly. And the thing is, what we have to remember too is as the whole world is watching, I'm willing to bet even I think Roosevelt's administration is charged during the time. Yeah, Roosevelt's got to be in power at this time. You know, his administration's keeping a close eye on this conflict because sooner or later, even his administration, he knew that eventually the United States was going to be dragged into this conflict, whether we wanted to or not.
What's also crazy is, like, again, this went for, like, China as well. Roosevelt at this time, even way before this, I'm not even sure, like, I know it's like around or before China's doing this, the invasion of China. Roosevelt's like, okay, we should really build a lot more ships. And he starts doing that years before the war. And when World War II finishes, all the ships that he commissioned to be built before the war, that was basically all the new ships that we had for the war. So again, that's what I was saying before, is like the only way China wins this is if they retroactively, 10 years before they're invaded, or 50 years before they're invaded, industrializes like Japan did, and also builds a new navy at least 10 years before China does, or before Japan invades them. Because it's like, you know, wars are more or less like determined before they happen, and there's some adjustment that can be made by generals, but for the most part, everything's already set in place.
Right on.
Italy. From this point on, Britain and America began loaning greater amounts of money to the Chinese war effort. At the same time that the winter offensive was ending, Nazi Germany was preparing for their major offensive against France. But first, the Nazis would invade Denmark and Norway in April, conquering the two countries within 2 months. To circumvent the strong Maginot Line on the French border, Germany then decided to invade Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg to blitzkrieg through the Ardennes and cut off Allied defences in the north. On May 10th, the Battle of France began, and in 2 weeks, the Benelux nations had already been deeply penetrated. Pushed to the sea, the surrounded British, French, and Belgian soldiers fiercely resisted the German assaults until June 4th, when the evacuation from Dunkirk was finally completed. The next day,
Which, by the way, is a heroic undertaking because even British civilians got involved with the evacuation of Dunkirk. So people don't talk about that, but it wasn't necessarily military vessels, but it was civilian ships too.
People talk more about Dunkirk than Nanking, though.
Yeah, that's true.
the Nazis started their general offensive through the Somme and Ain rivers, decisively defeating Allied forces with their superior tanks and airplanes, and occupying Paris on June 14th. The ensuing collapse of the French army successfully terminated the campaign. And
look how Italy's forces get there, and it's just like it's that little guy who hangs out with the bullies, like, hey, I'm here too. Like, no, stop it, stop it a little bit.
And ironically, like Paris, when Paris is about to be attacked, they surrender because they don't want Paris to be destroyed. Meanwhile, China's like, yeah, you can destroy our capital. Yeah, you can destroy our backup capital. Yeah, you can destroy our backup capital. Yeah, you can destroy our backup capital. We don't care.
The Axis powers would go on to occupy France and to establish a puppet government in Vichy, led by Philippe Pétain. In July, the Germans then prepared to start a naval and air blockade of the British Isles. A battle for air supremacy over the islands ensued, and the Nazis would start night bombing operations on Britain with the objective of forcing them to surrender. The UK was now alone, under bombardment and suffering the threat of possible naval invasion. This was
Operation Sea Lion. And for those of you who don't know, the Germans would. I know that I've seen a couple of books in history, science fiction books in particular, with alternate history talking about the Germans invading the United. It was never going to work.
I disagree.
Do you really think they would have pulled it off with horse-drawn carriages and everything else?
No,
You really
let's-
think they could have done
no.
something like even land there?
So if you're Germany, you're mainly a land power. You
Yeah.
have some ships. The UK has a lot of ships. If you have air supremacy over the channel, you can deal with those ships first. Then, if you were, and they almost did take out the Royal Air Force, but because of the bombing raid on Berlin, Hitler switched up the strategy that gave them all the breathing room they need to reorganize. If Germany had done an invasion of the UK, I'm not even saying it would have succeeded in the long run, because essentially for it to work, they would have to postpone their invasion of the Soviet Union for about a year because I'm saying, like, if they were to do it, they were half-assing it because they were getting ready. They're like, the UK will surrender. It's no big deal. I'm not that worried. And then they didn't, and they didn't expect that. But if they had taken it seriously and really said, we're not going to touch the Soviet Union until we take out the UK, if that was the mentality they had, I think they could have done it. But again, for that to happen that way, you'd have to, like, change the fundamental nature of what they prioritize. So in a sense, the only way it's possible is if I completely changed their motivations.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. Like, let's say if it was gonna, I think they'd be pushed back. If, let's say, they did get landfall, I don't think they could hold it.
Well, think about the number. Okay, so imagine for a second the air power. Let's just assume the air power is able to keep the channels clear, which I think is reasonable. Because we know how powerful air power is.
Right.
Let's say that they're able to keep at the Pas de Calais 60 miles on either side, completely free of ships. That's not that far of a distance for them to travel. All they need is, like, a large hose to move oil. I mean, you saw what the U.S. had to do in D-Day. They had Mulberry, which they might have not thought of.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some dock, and they just have to have it. But really, the big thing is they just have to be able to have oil move from one side to another, and logistics. And Pas de Calais is not that far. But again, like, for that to work, they'd have to, like, take it seriously, which they didn't.
True. There's a film that I would recommend people watch called Battle for Britain. It's obviously
Good movie.
obviously it's not historically accurate through and through, but it's a worthwhile watch. So there you go.
Yeah.
was the darkest hour for the Allies. The Japanese knew the Battle of Britain would see large numbers of British forces leaving Asia to help the home front.
Oh, yeah, just
Leaving
real quick,
places
real
like
quick.
Hong Kong.
Just to kind of reiterate my point, the biggest issue Germany would have had with invading the UK was logistics of maintaining the invasion.
Yeah.
And that would have never be possible if they're also invading the Soviet Union in the same year.
Yeah, they invaded the Soviet Union. They're obviously going to war with the United Kingdom, but also a few other things too. Because from what I remember, and I have to look more into it, but I know that Hitler not once, but I think 3 times really tried to get Francisco Franco involved with further blockading the Allied powers from getting any kind of foothold in Europe. And not once, but 3 times, Francisco Franco was like, no, because he wanted to tiptoe around it. He didn't want to get involved with Italy or Germany at the time, which I have to say was a dangerous but very smart political move he was doing.
So ironically, based on what you said earlier, he actually helped the Allies tremendously by crippling what was existing in Italy and blunting Germany.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, what I also want to bring up is, because I think Hitler was trying to do the similar thing that Napoleon was trying to do to the British Empire, where that was deny them any access in Europe. And
the reason Napoleon couldn't invade Great Britain is obviously the Battle of Trafalgar. Which destroyed that combined navy. By the way, can I tell you what I think? This is completely off topic to this video, but I would think what Napoleon could have done differently one small thing that would have maybe made him succeed a lot longer or indefinitely, perhaps.
Yeah.
Instead of having a blanket blockade against Britain and make everyone else join it, which they were not happy to do so, he could have just instituted a global 20% or something tariff on everything from Britain, and everyone collected it, and that money would exclusively go to building up a navy.
True. And he's that also not invading Russia. Because, again, the only people who conquered
But
Russia...
remember, why did he invade Russia? What was the biggest reason he invaded Russia? They broke the blockade and were trading with Britain.
Exactly. And,
So,
again, no one invades Russia without Genghis Khan and his fantastic friends.
I'm saying that if he had just made it like okay, Britain, you could trade with everyone, but you're funding me.
Yep.
Hong vulnerable to attack. Hong Kong remained a major trade route for foreign aid to China. Furthermore, since the start of World War II, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt had announced that he would revise the Neutrality Acts with a cash and carry policy that allowed the sale of military arms to China and the Allies, hoping that American support would be enough to stop Japan and Germany. China in particular had already been receiving valuable American aid since the USS Panay incident, as no formal declaration of war had ever happened. But after the fall of France, although the US population was still definitely anti-war, FDR would intensify the naval buildup pushed with the Vincennes Acts, and would begin to preemptively prepare for a war against the Nazis. Concurrently, the Japanese would be victorious in June with a minor offensive directed towards the capture of the cities of Yichang and Shaoyang, setting up an
What's up?
I was making a terrible joke. Continue.
important airbase to intensify the bombardment operations in China, and against the capital at Chongqing in particular. The Japanese would also allow German raiders operating in the Pacific during this period to resupply at Micronesia, which greatly increased tensions between Japan and the Allies. In the end, the problem of the British and American aid to China would force Japan to formalize its alliance with Germany and Italy with the signing of the Tripartite Pact in September, although it wouldn't join the war efforts, only blockading by land the British and French concessions in China. It's with this layout that we leave you for now, but join us next week as we finally cover the rising tensions between Japan and the US.
All right. What could possibly go wrong? All right. So we're already seeing how the conflict in Europe is already escalating further, and it's getting involved all over, especially in the South Pacific theater as well, and which will eventually lead to the United States itself getting involved in the war.
Yeah, it's like I love this background because it makes the outcome of what eventually does happen when the wars start. It's like my thought on reality is that reality always makes sense. It's just we don't always understand why it makes sense, and so we think it doesn't make sense, but it always does. And this is another example of you watch this sort of content, which they've done a really masterful job of putting together. I sort of glanced around, in between the last couple sessions, and I don't know if there is a more complete, in one spot, timeline, video series, and like anything that I found on the Pacific War as this is. So I feel greatly honored again that we're able to even watch this in the first place. And I know, like with Kings and Generals, how they're covering Ukraine. How I said to you, I thought that was one of the most miraculous things that exists, because we're at a point in history where we probably can't stop a pandemic.
No.
Let's be real, but we can basically in real time make historically accurate coverage of a war. And that's brand new in the level of detail that we've been seeing it at. And I think it's amazing that this channel does what it does. And it's, I don't think they expected whenever they started Kings and Generals that in the future they would not just be telling historical tales like this in great detail, but they would have the ability and resources to tell something in the same detail as these historical events, if not more so, about modern conflicts.
And if you want to see my coverage, or at least my coverage, my video thoughts on Julius Caesar's campaign in Gaul, please check them out. They're still ongoing, and I have to say, folks, that amount of detailed information about Caesar's campaign in Gaul, it is worthwhile. So again, if you're not supporting the original content creators, please do so.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think pretty soon we'll be starting with next time how the United States and the Empire of Japan would eventually come into conflict with each other. So the only way you're going to find out when we upload these videos is if you like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that ring bell notification. That way you're made aware when America Learns uploads new content. So I want to thank my colleague Daniel for joining me. I want to thank all of you sitting down watching. Give us your thoughts in the comment section below as well, and we'll see you all on the flip side. I'm Kit, and I'm out of here. Bye-bye.